Welcome everybody to our third and also last webinar of this series. We have been discussing earlier this year ASICs for safety critical automotive applications. And in our second webinar, we discussed the transition from a PCB to an ASIC. And today we're at the last webinar about custom ASIC as enabler for the MedTech. So all webinars will be available soon online. You will receive a link so you can look at them again if you want. Today's seminar will be given by Caroline Martes. Caroline is Business Development Manager at ICsense, and she joined us in 2017 after working at IMEC in various business roles. My name is Jeroen van Ham. I will be moderating this session. Important to know is that you can always ask questions during the webinar by using the chat box at the lower right corner, so please do so. And for the rest, I wish you a good webinar, so enjoy this one. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeroen, for this kind introduction, and welcome to this third and final session in our webinar series. So what's on the agenda for today? In my presentation, I will give you an overview of the different medical devices and their classifications, and we will focus on their key market drivers. We will also zoom in on the main reasons why custom ASIC will be the solution for your next medical chip. As a medical qualified ASIC design partner, we will also give you some insights in our development process, and we will show some recent medical examples for inspiration. And in the end, we will share some key technical and business takeaways to give you some inspiration for your next custom medical ASIC development. By the way, we have enabled some polls during our presentation to make the talk as interactive as possible, so I'm looking forward to your input. So let's start with a short introduction about ICsense. So ICsense is one of the largest FOB-independent European IC design houses within Europe. And today we have more than 80 people working within the company. So what do we offer? We offer either custom IC design services for companies with in-house ASIC design expertise and that want to outsource specific blocks or are looking for specific expertises to extend to their team. On the other hand, we also provide customer exclusive ASIC design and supply for companies that have a certain specification in mind and want to have fully qualified tested chips in the end. Customer exclusive means that we are not working as an IDM, but that we always design a unique chip that is custom made for your application. What makes us unique compared to the competition? I believe that we are very skilled and innovative, first-of-a-kind ASIC developments, and we also have a unique risk mitigation design methodology to improve first silicon success. We're also ISO 9001 and ISO 13485 certified for medical devices, and so it's also related to the topic of this presentation. And we also have compliant design flows with automotive functional safety, ISO 26262. Our headquarters are based in Leuven in Belgium, and we're celebrating our 15th anniversary this year. Since 2017, ICsense is an independent subsidiary of the TDK group. That means that we're working independently, but we have more than 65% of our revenue coming from non-TDK related customers. So we can leverage on TDK, but we can still work independent for all the markets. We have mixed-signal ASICs for different markets. At the moment, 50% of our projects is automotive oriented, with medical as our second largest market, closely followed by consumer and industrial products. So, as you can see here on this picture, what you see here is a nice representation of what is called a custom mixed-signal ASIC that is included in most of the cases. So what you see on this chip is that this chip will contain an analog part to making the connection to the real world. For example, this can be a connection or a readout of a sensor. It can be something like a temperature, pressure, position sensor, or brains to measure brain signals or biochemical signals as such. There's always also a digital part on the chip to do the on-chip processing of the raw data and to make the interfacing to the digital world. And some of these chips also contain high voltage for either power supply management, can be for battery management, or to do some power conversions or driving functionalities like actuation or pulse generation. And this is also our core expertise of the company. So we focus on either sensor and MEMS interfacing, high voltage and power management, or low power optimized designs with specific communication interfaces as well. So yes, of course, you can buy lots of multi-purpose mixed signal chipsets on the market, but what we see that in most cases, customers prefer to go to a custom mixed signal ASIC if they want to go beyond what is commercially available. That can be for many reasons, to increase your accuracy or to have a better dynamic range, to optimize the power consumption, for example, in case of battery operated systems. Also, in case of miniaturization or smaller form factor, custom ASIC can be a key driver for that. Also, to increase the robustness or to ensure a more reliable operation, functional safety is also one of the reasons why companies prefer to go to a custom ASIC design, or in case you want to increase your immunity for hostile environments like ESD, EMC, or MRI related inputs. We do, as I said, we provide either design services or ASIC design and supply projects. So within the company, let's say there's a 50-50 split between both business models. But as you can see here, our services can be optimized according to the experience and the request of the customers. In case of design and supply, we work together with third parties for the actual manufacturing, the packaging, the production testing, and the medical qualification of these ASICs. If you look at our customer bases, at least of the ones that we can disclose, you will see that it's well diversified, both in company types as geographically. You will see pure IDMs, you see fabless IC companies, you see also products companies. With respect to location, let's say that about 60% of our activities is based in Europe. The rest is equally split between the US and Asia. Let's start with the content of the talk. So today, more than 500,000 different medical technologies are available in hospital, community care settings, and at home. So in general, these are all products, services, or solutions that are used to save or improve people's lives based on prevention, monitoring, diagnosis, care, and treatment. These can be everyday objects like syringes and plasters, screening tests, wheelchairs, pregnancy tests, but we will also include more advanced medical devices. In general, medical technologies can be divided in three main categories. And the first one is one of the medical devices that are products, services, or solutions that prevent, diagnose, monitor, treat, and care by physical means. It can be in or on the body, but with no pharmaceutical, immunological, or metabolic means. The second category that can be identified are the in vitro diagnostics. So these are the IVD, also called IVDs. These non-invasive tests are used on biological samples like blood, urine, tissues, and are used to determine the status of a person's health. And then the third category is what we call the digital health. These are tools and services that use ICT to improve prevention, diagnostics, treatment, monitoring, and so on, and management of health and lifestyle. In the European Union, medical technologies are tightly regulated by laws that govern the safety and the performance of devices across their lifetime, both pre and post-market. So within a presentation, we will focus on the medical devices. So within the medical devices, we will focus also on the active medical devices. So we're leaving out the simple bandages, syringes, and glasses, and so on in this presentation. The medical device regulation defines an active medical device as any medical device that is relying for its function on the source of an electrical energy or any other source of power other than that directly generated by the human body, and which acts by converting this energy. So we have a lot of examples within the active medical field, like ultrasonic, X-ray imaging, patient monitoring, telemetry, hearing aids, lab-on-chip, body-worn sensors, and camera systems. There are specific special groups within that field of that category of active medical devices. The first one is related to the active implantable medical devices. So these are active medical devices which are totally or partially introduced, can be surgically or mechanically into the human body, and which are intended to stay within the body after the procedure. To those category of devices like cochlear implants, pacemakers, defibrillators, neurostimulators, and so on, there's a tighter set of regulations that apply to this group. Another special category within active medical devices are the mobile devices. These mobile devices are related to more wireless technologies. So can be like wearables, implantable sensors, ingestible sensors, stuff like that. So that's a more third category within this active medical devices group. A lot of market studies confirm that the medical device market will continue to grow with a 5% a year and reaching about almost $800 billion by 2030. These market studies foresee an increasing demand for innovative new devices like wearables and e-health services as lifestyle diseases become more dominant, and also economic development unlocks the huge potential emerging markets. By 2030, the leading medical device players will be those that play an active role in delivering value by connecting the customer, the patients, and the consumer. This will require a shift from treatment and cure to prevention through integrated smart services and solutions that brings down the cost of care and improves the outcome. New technologies will not only produce effectivity and saving to the patients, they will also help medical device companies playing a wider role in the care journey. Over the coming decade, we expect the introduction of a lot of new innovations in the field of innovative surgical interventions, diagnosis and imaging, drug delivery and patient monitoring, and also assistive care and therapy devices. To enable all these new and emerging developments, we see a strong innovation need towards increased performance and accuracy. For example, the Apple iWatch. A few years ago, the ECG monitoring was only a gadget. It was nice to have, but since 2018, Apple received the FDA approval for that ECG monitoring application and has become an actual medical device. So you see there is a more increase in performance accuracy also in the wearable market. There's also a demand towards more integration and miniaturization. Like, for example, in the case of ingestible pills or cameras, I would believe that for the sake of the patient, you want to make this as small as possible. And of course, increased autonomy and a longer battery life are essential for seamless and widely adoption. There are many technological reasons to consider custom ASIC, but also the business cases can change from case to case. For example, in case of new emergent products that don't exist before, there are a lot of important factors that play a role, like form factor, IP protection, market entry. While on the other hand, you have the single-use disposable products where cost is critical. Also the reduction of the bill of material, high volumes, time to market, you see a different demand towards their business case. And it all comes down to one thing. So balancing cost and features for your product is essential. We see a lot of our customers considering custom ASIC design for many technical as business reasons. The first of all, most important one is that we believe that a custom ASIC will give full control and IP ownership to your core therapeutic functionality. So like by introducing flexibility and optimization to your future applications. This will also enable you the possibility to with one ASIC that you can serve different products at the same time. So with one ASIC you can target either high-end as low-end applications with one chip. A second item is also that the ASIC will be custom and exclusively made for that customer. So this will make it more difficult for the competition to copy your system as such. A third reason is that it will also further optimize your system and power performances compared to components currently available on the market. And you will also be less dependent of the availability of external components. We see that there is a lot of questions related to that, because we see that related to supply of components, there is a lot of volatility on the market, especially to discrete components as such. The second reason to go to custom ASIC will also be on the reduction of the number of multiple discrete components that can be replaced with one chip. In the end, this will also make the bill of material a lot lower, and will also introduce the introduction of cheaper electronic components as such. The integration will also create a smaller total footprint. So you will need to use a smaller, simpler PCB design, and will also reduce a lot of advanced assembly and manufacturing processes due to the fact that you will have a smaller product as such. A third reason is that you will also have full control of your own ASIC supply and qualification process. So you have no longer a risk of having components obsolete and that you have to rebuild or redo your whole system development and qualification once a component becomes obsolete and no longer available on the market. And it will also create sufficient guarantee towards medical compliant supply together with your partners. So as you can see here in some of the examples that we have investigated for some of our customers, is that we have integrated multiple core components, a lot of discrete components, amplifiers, and so on, that can be easily combined in one chip, while on the other hand, introducing sufficient flexibility and customization to make your system future-proof and able to target also possible next-generation applications. Depending on your form factor requirements, different packages are possible. Either you can use custom-made bump die examples, as you can see here on this slide. So it means that the connector balls are directly connected underneath the silicon die to enable either smaller dedicated form factors, also very thin solutions, so that the chip can be, for example, in the right case, easily integrated in this neuroprobe application. On the other hand, we also see a lot of medical companies choosing for standard medical qualified packages, such as a QFN and so on. The main reason for that is that in this case, you can use the same package for your whole product portfolio, also in between generations, and that you don't have to do the duplication of the package qualification again. So it's a choice that you have to make as a customer. Is it either the form factor integration, or is it more like, no, I want to standardize the qualification process within the company? As I said, so before, different products require different business models. So we see often different set of requirements between either a young medical startup compared to a larger medical technical company like companies like Medtronic and Abbott and so on. So zooming in on the startups, the key questions that we get from medical startups is that they are asking for a strong support at architectural definition level. So they want a lot of feedback to check what would be on the ASIC, how the system should be integrated on that. So they require an experienced team that can do a lot of system level thinking beyond the ASIC. So in that way, they can have direct feedback on the trade-offs that have to be made. So, for example, like features to be integrated versus increase of complexity versus will that increase also the cost of, does it come for free almost during the design? So in that way, we can also give direct feedback to the customer to make the right selections, to make the right choices, what to integrate on chip or not. What they also request, what medical startup companies are also like, is a more phased development process. Most companies need several funding rounds to finance their development. So in the first round, they want to develop their silicon prototyping and also to do some bench test validation to have first tests, first silicon available to start their first medical trials. In case of success, in a second round, they will finance the full production development in a second round. So in that way, they prefer a more phased development approach. On the other hand, in the beginning, when we're talking about startup companies, let's be realistic. The volumes are very low. So it will take a few years to have really in the high volume production. So even for those companies, they want to have a guaranteed access to a medical qualified foundry that will give sufficient priority for them and that they don't lose priority to a foundry where they put more priority on more industrial high volume markets. On the other hand, large MedTech companies, for them, time to markets is really key. And for that, they really need a medical experienced ASIC design partner that has a very stable design flow that can introduce very low risk and high success, high first time silicon success rates. So for that, they want really a proven, qualified partner that has also experience not only on the design, but also how the test and the supply look like. And they want, of course, a full ISO 13485 medical qualified partner for that. So in short, it's important to work with a medical qualified partner, such as ICsense, for many reasons. So either the customer exclusive ASIC development, so that every ASIC is made and sold for one customer. Also, the system level thinking beyond the ASIC is very valuable to the customer. A unique design methodology to guarantee low risk. And also the ISO 13485 qualification is really key for any medical ASIC development. As I said, also the expertise with in-house test expertise and supply chain management will also be an adder to what the customer is requesting. And it's very important as well to have a strong and proven partnership with foundries, with OSAT partners that are compliant with medical device technologies. And as I said, also a phased ASIC development process tailored to the customer is very valuable. At ICsense, our ASIC design flow is a real stage-gated process, as you can see here. So we only start with the next phase once the previous one is finished. The first phase is what we call the architectural definition and where the specification phase is done. So this is the most important phase, and this is where all the IP is generated, where the homework is done to define all the specifications of the specific ASIC within the system, and that we try to minimize all the risk for further development. So at the end of that first phase, we come to what we called the freeze of the specification, and so where the ASIC specification is defined together with the customer, so that based on that document, we will start the actual design in phase 2. The reason for that is that we really want to investigate everything up front, so that once the design train is rolling, you don't want to stop for iterations to revise the specifications again and so forth, because we're putting a lot of effort and a lot of people on the design. So this first phase contains almost everything. So we'll do some system analysis. We also do the building blocks, we make a topology and so on. In the second phase is what we call the ASIC development and the test, and so where we come to the prototyping ASICs. In that case, in that phase, we will do the actual development and the verification of the analog and digital blocks. So we'll within our design, we will immediately target on the actual final architecture. So we do no intermediate test structures and so forth. So the reason for that is that by doing so and targeting to the final ASIC is that we will increase our first time silicon success. Also, this also includes specific block and aspects needed for testing and manufacturing purposes. And we add some additional circuits to improve our testing and testing capabilities during the design. Within our design, we also take care that our design is robust over a larger range of process voltage and temperature variations. Chips are not designed to work at one temperature on one voltage and so on. So specs are always mentioned in terms of min-max ranges. So we must make sure that our chip is designed under all circumstances. Then within the second phase, when the design is and the verifications and the simulations are finished, we start with the actual manufacturing of the prototyping ASICs. And when the chips come back, we will perform the first bench testing and start with the development of the production test if required by the customer. And based on these first silicon samples, the customer can actually start with your first field tests. The third phase is what we call the ASIC industrialization and the phase towards production, so that based on the outcome of the test results from either the bench testing or your field tests, we can decide if a certain redesign or relayout is necessary. So sometimes specifications need some trimming, or after testing, the customer decides that certain specs needs to be changed or some specs needs to be added. In that case, a redesign is necessary. So also here, we do the manufacturing and the production ASICs, and we do the retesting again. And then if everything goes well, we start with the medical qualification of the ASIC. With respect to timing, so depending, of course, on the complexity and the system maturity of the design, so if all the trade-offs have been investigated upfront or not, let's say that if you count altogether, so that for phase 1 and phase 2, it will take about, let's say, 1 year to have first silicate samples available for testing. So that's a number that you can keep in mind. So what are the most critical building blocks that you can find on a mixed signal medical IC? So what you can see here is that we see a lot of sensing functionality coming up. So like sensor readouts can be either brain signals, but also ECG, EEG, pressure, temperature, oxygen levels, and so on. On the other hand, also like for imaging, X-ray imaging, and so on, ultrasonic imaging can be applied for that. Stimulation is also a field of expertise that we see often on mixed signal requests, can be used for fully programmable multi-electrode pulse generation and neutralization pulses. That's some example of that. Power management, for example, some designs require low power optimizations or optimizations for different operating modes. Power supply management, some cases the mixed signal chip needs to generate the power supplies for different chips on the PCB, or like MRI ESD compatibility is also included in power management. With respect to battery management, what are the typical requests that we see popping up? Like, for example, wireless charging, battery monitoring implementations. These are quite often used for wearable medical devices. Also, the communication is an aspect that's always there, especially communication to the microcontroller. Also, some transmission protocols, like can be inductive link or NFC, will be put on chip. And then, of course, the digital flexibility and the configuration. So it can be either a steady digital state machine or on-chip processing for some filtering, data processing of the measurement data and so on. So let's have a quick look at some medical examples to give you some inspiration. So the first one is a chip that we have made for stimulation and recording ASICs for implants. Can be used for nerve stimulation, spinal cords, DBS. On this chip, we have developed high voltage pulse stimulations for more than 40 electrodes, all connected through a high voltage switch matrix, and all these pulses are fully programmable. So also here, and there's sufficient flexibility to play with the different pulses according to your therapeutic needs. On the other hand, there's also the sensing. So we have implemented 10 differential sensing channels to record small signals. Also on this chip, there is some power management that is needed for the full bridge rectification, also the CDC and charge pumps. Also, this case is an implantable device, so we have to take care about MRI, EMC, and ESD compatibility, and also make sure that the chip is ISO13485 certified. A second example that we have developed for a customer called Cochlear. For this one, we have developed a stimulation ASIC for cochlear implants. So the main functionality of the chip was for a multi-electrode high flexible current stimulation of the ASIC. So it's we have very accuracy digital analog converters. Also, we are measuring the electrode impedance during stimulation so that we can measure the impedance of the cochlear by doing so. On the other hand, there is also a lot of sensing, so we are able to sense or to measure the electrode, the nerve, and the brain response instrumentation with a readout chain. The chip also includes a proprietary inductive RF link, can be used for the data communication and also the wireless powering. And as such, also the chip contains a very high efficient power supply management that also be used to generate the power supply of various components within the implant. A second chip that I've developed for the same customer, also for cochlear implants, is that we have developed a mixed signal companion ASIC for hearing aids. In this case, the sound processor. The sound processor is the external part outside that is connected to the to the implanted part using an RF link. So this mixed signal ASIC contains the power management for different battery configurations. So in this case, multiple battery configurations can be used within this product, where we have developed a flexible buck boost DC-DC converter and have also included some power monitoring. Also, voltage and current measurements have been done for the battery monitoring, and also a Class D and a high-end audio ADC is implemented on the chip. Another example that we have developed for a large medical company is that we have developed an ultra-low power sensor readout with an NFC interface. So in this case, the application is a very ultra-low power sensor, which is also battery powered using a single cell of 1.5 volts, where we have developed an ultra-low power measurement chain. Also, the NFC communication was developed by ICsense. So in this way, we have developed direct powering from the NFC field. So in this case, no external power was needed. And we were also able to set up a two-way communication so that either the wake up and the measurement data transfer can be used for that. And the NFC interface is also compliant with ISO 15693. Next to that, the chip also contains a lot of on-chip digital processing, like an SPI interface and the protocol itself, a measurement sequencer, and a lot of built-in self-tests protocols. Another example is the chip in tip, also related to brain stimulation. The nice thing in this example is the form factor. As you can see here, it's a 0.8 by 6 square millimeter chip. It's really at the boundary of the physical dimensions, what is possible related to pressure and so on. So the key features also here contains a high voltage switch matrix to distribute the IPG currents over 8 stimulation channels, also the ultra low power operation. And this project was developed in close collaboration with Medtronic, Salvia, Technical University of Delft and Murata in collaboration within a European research project. Another example is the implantable lithium-ion battery charger. For this client, we have developed a power management chip that can be used for implantable stimulation systems. So this chip contains the regulator, the power management, the boost DC-DC converter, and a lot of intelligent wireless charging circuits. Also, with respect to low power optimization, we have put a lot of tricks in that to keep the sleep mode as low as possible, and also to keep the storage mode leakage below the battery leakage, so that if the chip is on the shelf for many years, that it's still operational when the chip must be implanted within the body. Also, like ESD compatibility is key for that. This one is another example for an implantable rechargeable battery management ASIC. In this case, it was a fully implantable medical device, which is being used for wireless recharging in combination with a lithium-ion battery management system. Also here, lots of interesting DC-DC current voltage measurements and detection diagnostics have been implemented on chip. Another example in the field is the electronic patch that we have developed for medical adherence. So if this is a patch that you can, that will give signals to remind you when to take your medicine, for example. The nice thing on this patch is that the ASIC integrated, or the chip itself integrated a lot of system on chip functionality. In that way, we could lower the bill of material of the whole system. Also, the chip had a very accurate on-chip timer without the use of a crystal. Also, sufficient programmability was requested by the customer. And then another example is the ECG acquisition that we have developed for ST. So with this chip, you could measure a lot of highly integrated diagnostic biopotential system signals. So we were able to do a lot of ECG and also other biopotential measurements. The bioimpedance measurement was also one of the signals that could be measured. So there was a configurable baseband filtering, also with the right leg driver, the Wilson common terminals, and the shield drivers were measured with this chip. And then a last example to give you some inspiration is the lab-on-chip cancer cell detection that has been developed as part of a research project together with IME, Catholic University of Leuven, Janssen, and the research group CMST of University of Ghent. Within this project, we were investigating the possibility of detecting tumor cells in blood by using lab-on-chip and so on. So we were using an active silicon sieve with more than 10,000 pores, and by doing so, we could measure the cell impedance. So we developed the impedance measurement readout, and by measuring the cell impedance, we could measure the actual number of cells that were connected or that were put in the different pores. So by giving some of these examples, you will see that we have developed quite a large silicon-proven portfolio within the company. So to give you some inspiration on that. Based on our expertise and lessons that we have learned over the years, we would also like to share some key takeaways together with you. So the first one is the no Swiss knife, and that's how I call it, because The first thing that I would propose is that let's focus on the core functionality of your product and target application. By combining different platforms in one chip, this will increase the overall complexity and the risk of your overall system. By doing so, you will also increase the development cost, the project timing, and also the unit prices with no guaranteed success. By the way, your investors will also not like this. So it's very important that you make the right choices, what you will put on the chip or not. Also, by doing so, and especially targeting your core IP, it means that this will become less dependent. You will become less dependent of the availability of external components. The second item that I would like to stress is please check the added value of your custom ASIC in the overall system. Make good assumption what you will put on the chip and what you will put or what you will remain on the PCB. For example, keep in mind that power and high frequency RF that does not match well in one chip. For a given technology flavor, this will increase the noise level at the substrate, and this will have a big impact on the overall behavior of your chip. So make good trade-offs, what you will put on the chip and what you will use a companion chip. So in most cases, we see next to the mixed signal ASIC, we see a companion chip, for example, either the RF or the microprocessor functionality. A third remark is make good hardware-software trade-offs at system level. On one hand, introducing flexibility and optimization can be important to target with one ASIC your whole product portfolio as such, but keep in mind that sufficient flexibility is integrated. On the other hand, make good trade-offs between configuration and the diagnostics with the selected microcontroller. Are you targeting a fully programmable ASIC via the microcontroller, or do you prefer to have it all hard-coded on the ASIC? For example, we see cases where the pulse shapes are continuously generated by the microcontroller, that you have a very stupid ASIC as such, or do you prefer to work with, for example, more like an exchange of burst parameters set by the microcontroller with one command, and that the ASIC will generate autonomously the burst of the pulses as such. So you need to make good trade-offs on that. Also, with respect to functional safety, take into account what you will cover at system level or what you will cover at ASIC level. Sometimes it's easier to integrate it on the ASIC, because by integrating a lot of external components and lots of external flexibility, this can simplify the overall safety risk of your system and also will simplify your qualification flow. It's very easy. Fewer components will also, you don't have lesser components to qualify. On the other hand, by integrating on chip, you can also define the right diagnostics that interface with your microcontroller. The fourth reason, what you need to consider is what will be the processing on chip versus off chip, and what's also the data rate that's related to that. So sometimes it's better to do some on chip processing to lower the data rate exchange with your microcontroller. Battery life can be the most challenging obstacle in implementing disposable or single-use medical devices with integrated electronics, especially if that device also requires communication or certain interfacing to the outside world. So a lot of advances in low-power chip architecture and higher density battery technologies have opened up to new opportunities. So with respect to optimization at system level, you need to make good trade-offs. Is the microcontroller always on, or will the ASIC enable or allow the microcontroller to go in sleep mode? So make good trade-offs on that. Also, what kind of communication protocol are you selecting? At data rates, what are you targeting for that? Also, with respect to optimization of the overall current consumptions, you can play with different states. So you can make sure that the chip is optimized under all different operation modes during shelf life, sleep mode, and operating mode. So the different phases have to be defined very carefully. Also, wireless charging requires dedicated battery management and monitoring. So like state of charge, state of health monitoring comes together with the wireless charging. Also protection circuits, current voltage and temperature over protection measurements are necessary. On the other hand, if we want to target optimized on-chip power management, we see a lot of implementations to highly efficient buck-boost DC-DC converters. Keep in mind that if you want to make sure that your product is MRI compatible, you need to use non-ferrite or either air coils or either consider switch cap implementation for your implants. These solutions are, of course, lesser efficient than with ferrite coils. So you need to make some trade-offs. Do you want to go very efficient systems, or do you want to make sure that your product is MRI compatible? Also, you can play with optimized power domain architectures so that you define high voltage and low voltage domains. And you can also use the different clock domains and duty cycling for different functional blocks. For example, by doing so, this will allow you the possibility to use more power during a certain measurement time, and that you then switch it off to lower the overall current consumption. Third design consideration to consider is the MRI ESD compatibility. Keep in mind that devices with long leads, like for example IPGs, can act as an antenna and will induce currents, possibly breaking the chip. So keep in mind that this is something that you need to cover at system level. Also, the selection of the right external components can relax the system MRI requirements. So for example, in the feed-through to the electrodes, the power of the MRI field can be buffered in the external capacitors already. Also, you can define certain safe states that in case of an MRI field is detected, that this chip will go in a safe state. And as I said, so you need to make the right trade-offs at product level on how to deal with the MRI compatibility. Also, ESD is an important one, especially for the pins that see the outside world. For example, for those pins, 4 up to 8 kV volt can be exposed to that. For example, when the surgeon is using plastic gloves, those things will increase exposure during handling. Also keep in mind current leaks in the body, so you don't want to have DC currents injecting in the body. What the reason for that is that DC currents will dissolve, lead to the dissolving of the electrodes, and you don't want moving metal ions in your body. And also DC currents will create an excitation of nerves, and that will also decrease the comfort to the patient. Also do the selection of the right communication protocol. So choose the right communication protocol depending on the absorption of the tissue, the data rates, as mentioned here on the table. The most important ones that we see popping up in the our customers are either the MICT or the MET radio, also more proprietary low power radios are also applicable, or more like Bluetooth Low Energy is one of the ones also frequently used by the customer. Keep in mind that the medical device regulation and also the FDA requires additional EMC RF regulations, and also security and data protection can be mandatory. So we can choose either to go for a proprietary approach or considering components of the shelf as such. Please keep in mind that, of course, security is very important. You don't want people able to hack your device. So also security protection mechanisms are needed. Also, as I said, the on-chip versus the off-chip integration, we prefer like Bluetooth Low Energy, the MICT more as act as a companionship, while we see that more lower data rates like the NFC or more proprietary low data rate protocols can be integrated on your mixed signal ASIC. A fifth item to consider is the medical device regulation. In the European Union, medical technologies are tightly regulated by the law. As from May 2020, the new medical device regulation will fully apply to all medical devices. And this classification of medical devices drives many post and pre-market requirements. So this classification is done into 4 classes following a risk-based approach. So the higher the risk, the higher the class. So before placing a medical device on the European market, manufacturers need to produce a lot of technical documentation providing the evidence of the conformity with this legislation. So technical documents need to be conform with the existing MDD or the Active Implantable Medical Device Directive. As of May 2020, a new regulation will become in force, and that for manufacturers to obtain or renew their CE certificate, this technical documentation will need to comply to this new medical directive, even if they have been on the market previously and so on. What does this MDR require? So this requires that all technical documentation that has been developed during the design and the development process of a device must be kept in records and must be maintained throughout its entire life cycle. So that means that during the development and the design process, but also the findings during the verification and the validation, even at clinical and market trials, must be kept in record. Also, design reviews are important so that we keep track of all approval and changes of all specifications, and that we monitor, of course, how these changes have been implemented in the process. A clear structure throughout technical documentation is helpful to ensure that the reviewing body can, of course, clearly understand all the content. So therefore, it's very important for the manufacturer to maintain traceability at all levels, either at the user requirements level, but also at the functional requirement, the risk analysis, the clinical evaluations, and general safety and performance requirements, and vice versa. As you all know, is that one user requirement can determine several functional requirements, and each of these functional requirements can be involved in several, let's say, hazards and associated risks, and each risk can be identified through a risk analysis and can also be linked to one or more questions. So you see, it's a quite nested structure. So that's why it's very important to have an in-house requirements management system that keeps tracks of all these different levels of documentation and how this is all linked together. Next to that, we all need to monitor and process, to keep track of the whole process through a quality management system. And that's why we see that an ISO 13485 quality management system is mandatory. So compliance with ISO 13485 is often seen as a first step in achieving compliance with European regulation. So therefore, if you want to comply to ISO, so if you're complying to ISO 13485 together with a good review of all the required technical documents, that's, I think, a good step in order to obtain your CE marking. Jumping into the ISO 13485, so what is this? ISO 13485 defines and represents all the requirements needed for a comprehensive quality management system for the design and manufacturing of the medical devices. So it's designed to be used by organizations, all organizations involved in the design, the production, installation, and servicing of medical devices as such. and it can also be used by internal and external parties to help them with their auditing process. It's closely linked to ISO 9001, but with more extensive effort needed at organizational level, data management and documentation, as mentioned before, but also the risk management and the safety scenario analysis. So having a closer look at that, so what do we do for that? So from a design partner, we perform a specific design FMEA, design failure mode in effect analysis, where we focus on real systematic design failures. Random hardware failures are not part of the design FMEA, but are analyzed in a safety FMEA. So this is really a qualitative and indicative bottom-up approach. So we focus only on the ASIC, not on the package and on the other external components. And as an input, we start from the requirements as such. So where we have a very in-depth implicit review on the existence and completeness of the function and the requirements. What will be the outcome of the FMEA is that we really have a preventive list of actions, can be topology choices, new components, added new requirements, and also added simulations, but can also be detective actions where we define additional bench tests or system measurements by the customer at product level. So this is done together with the customer and our design team and assisted by a design FMEA moderator. Next to the design considerations I would like to share with you, there's also an important one related to the process manufacturing and the technology for medical devices. Access to medical compliant process technology is key for your medical development. So you need to choose a technology that is suitable for medical applications. In most cases, we use or we select a technology based on the application. Is the high voltage or a low voltage process, lots of analog, lots of digital. So what kind of process node are we using? But keep in mind that not all of these foundries are suitable for use in medical devices, especially also not for implantable devices. Also, data retention and traceability is key. MDR FDA requests more than 15 years of data retention. Check with your foundry if that's the case. Not all guarantee as such. Also, guaranteed access, low volume support from the foundry is essential. Also, process repeatability over time. You want to have a stable process that within a number of years, the same behavior is expected. And also medical qualification and qualification procedures to medical class 1, 2, and 3 are essential with a target below 1 ppm or even maximum 10 ppm as such. By doing so, you will have a guaranteed market supply with no risk of having obsolete components, and you can become a guaranteed medical supply partner. Having said that, I think I came to the end of my presentation, and by doing so, I hope that my presentation gave you some key takeaways on that the medical device market is booming with a strong request towards more integrated smart medical devices for a lot of new therapeutic monitoring and diagnostic medicine. There are also many technical and business reasons to consider custom ASIC, system integration, form factor, bill of material, costs, IP protection as such, and where balancing features and costs are key for your application. Don't forget about regulation, MDR, and dedicated requirements management system in combination with the ISO 13485 quality management system is mandatory. And of course, choose a medical qualified and experienced ASIC design partner for your development. In the end, you don't want to waste time and money for your development. So having said that, we hope that this presentation have given you some insights and inspiration for your next medical ASIC development.
Thank you very much, Caroline. We have received a lot of questions on the mail, on the chat, sorry, so we will not be able to answer them all. We got questions about retinal stimulation and our background, about the specific nodes. We got questions on how many design spins you need to come to the final silicon, the final mass production ready product. Maybe one question to close off the seminar. So Caroline, this question came up quite a few times. What is actually the minimum required quantity for a custom ASIC for medical?
Yeah, that's indeed a good question, but a not so straightforward answer. So this, of course, depends on the business cases. For example, if you are targeting a high volume application, like, for example, these glucose monitoring patches and so on, which are really cost driven. And when we talk about high volume, yeah, of course, for such application, yeah, minimum annual volume of about 100,000 a year, I think is the minimum to consider. On the other hand, if you have a medical application like a neuroprobe, yeah, there is no other solution. You don't want to put a computer inside your head or a PCB inside your head as such. So in that case, cost is less of a driver, and where integration and form factor are more essential. So in those cases, we even have customers targeting a few thousand samples a year. And let's be honest, I think the total cost for the whole development will be much higher compared to the cost of that simple one ASIC.
Okay, thank you very much. And the other questions we will try to answer offline. Maybe one last item. We will be at the Medica fair this year in Düsseldorf. It's the world's largest medical fair. It will take place in November. So if you want to have more information, speak to us directly. Please come and visit us at the Medica. We thank you a lot for attending the webinar and wish you a nice evening or a nice day, depending on your time zone. Thanks a lot.